Hello everyone, and welcome to today's SANS webcast, How to Build and Maintain an Open Source SIM. My name is Carol Auth of the SANS Institute, and I will be moderating today's webcast. Today's featured speakers are John Hubbard and Justin Henderson. Both are SANS instructors and course authors. If during the webcast you have any questions for our presenters, please enter them into the questions window located on the GoToWebinar interface at any time. Please note that this webcast is being recorded, and a copy of the slides and recording of this webcast will be available for viewing later today and can be found on the SANS registration page. And with that, I'd like to hand the webcast over to John.
All right, thank you, Carol. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thanks so much for attending. We're really excited to do this webinar because this is the culmination of many months of work between Justin and I, and we're bringing you the first SANS SIEM Design course. It's called SEC 455, SIEM Design and Implementation. And so in this webcast, we will be covering some of the info about the class and our motivations behind it and dive into some of the content that you can expect. A quick about us. The class was co-authored by Justin and myself. We're both instructors, teach 555 and 511. Justin is the author of 555, which is a closely related class. We're both dedicated blue teamers, and we want to see defenders succeed. So if you've seen our past webcasts, you know we think SIM is a big part of that success. And SEC 455 is meant to fill a gap in demand that we saw from when we teach SEC 555. Students were really hungry for additional info on Elasticsearch, which is heavily featured as the tool in the detection and analytics course. So we had a lot of people asking for additional info, how to use it, a lot of interest around the subject. So we came up with SEC 455. Not everyone had used it before, and so it's meant to go deeper. It's a 2-day course, and it focuses on the Elastic Stack and using it to set up an open source SIM. So first of all, real quick, what is a SIM? These are the basic things we expect a SIM to do. Any SIM that you can buy will technically meet these requirements. Real-time log collection, the parsing and normalization, and the indexing and storage of all your logs. They can all do that sort of thing. But there's a big difference in the actual user experience in between a lot of these products and the friction that you might encounter when trying to complete a given task with one of them. That friction can either make your SIM that you have a joy to use or something that's painful for your analysts, and maybe they avoid it until they really have to use it because it's slow and it doesn't respond and the UI isn't intuitive. So this is what we want to fix with this class. We're fans of the Elastic Stack, and we think that it facilitates a lot of fast detection and analytics. And so this course is centered around using the Elastic Stack to create a SIM. In the right hands, we think a well-tuned SIM is the most powerful tool SOC can use, and so we want to make sure that everyone has one that they enjoy. And this is the things that really make the difference. As an analyst, when you use a SIM, you want something that can collect logs easily. It needs to be dependable, obviously, but painless parsing. A lot of analysts don't necessarily know how to do the parsing themselves, and so maybe they never actually learn to do it, or when they do it, it's so painful they're not inclined to do it in the future. That's something that's really important, we think, because parsing is so crucial to being able to cut out the data that you need, and you need to find quickly. Enrichment. If you've seen our past webcasts, you know what we think about enrichment. We did one back in November called Modern Log Parsing and Enrichment. And if you missed that, I recommend you go back and see some of the awesome things that you can do with the Elastic Stack in terms of enrichment. And then speed. Obviously, we've all heard of and probably heard us refer to SIMs as the coffee break SIM. Sometimes they get so slow and bloated that things take minutes or hours or whatever to return a result. That's not something that's really acceptable in a real-time incident response scenario. So we need something that's quick. And of course, low cost, long retention periods, that's all nice to have when possible. So we address all these items in SEC 455 and think Elasticsearch does a pretty good job. And that's why we centered the course around it. We like that it's open source, it's friendly to developers in the community. So with the SIM, how important is it? This is from the SANS Threat Landscape Survey from this past year. When asked, what tools do you find the most helpful? Most people will say log management in their SIM. It's the top two of the top three items there. And over 70% of people say it's their most helpful in finding the scope of malicious events. In addition, from the SOC survey, how does your SOC correlate and analyze event data, IOCs, and other security related and threat data? An overwhelming majority of people say SIM. So this is obviously a very, very big tool, and it's very important to our SOCs. This is the problem, the price. A lot of times even though they're important and popular, they cost quite a bit, and people try to keep them the cost down on that. And so that's a tricky thing to kind of balance performance and the cost. This is from a Ponemon Institute study that said of 559 organizations that were surveyed, this was their average cost. So 1.78 million on labor cost, 1.3 on contractors, consultants, and managed service providers, and 1.1 spent on other costs for services related to SIEM installation and deployment. These are really big numbers, and we would, of course, expect a lot from this kind of investment, right? But however, we find this. So when asked about the importance and satisfaction with the SIEM, 76% of people or of organizations agreed that they were very, very important. However, the satisfaction levels with these were at a terrible 48%. I was trying to compare this to other products and services that we're familiar with, and I looked at the numbers from the American Customer Satisfaction Index, and on the right there, that box is the bottom of the list. So the absolute worst industries in terms of customer satisfaction. We have airlines and ISPs and all that. They're in the 60s, 70s, and we have SIEMs that we're paying millions of dollars for and are considerably worse than that. So we obviously have a problem here. And that's something that we're trying to address with this class. We're trying to figure out what's going on and show people a better way to do things. So where's that money going that people are spending? The three biggest cost categories are human capital, installation, and software. So this is what we want to address with SEC 455. And it could be argued that the other two would also be covered with this because it kind of designates your hardware and your annual maintenance when we go with the model that we're talking about in class. So when you take this class, what you're going to learn is how the system works down to a low level and how to completely set it up and deploy it on your own, with the idea being you probably wouldn't even need professional services, because what we're going to do is have you walk through all the way from just having a bare Linux VM with basically no setup at all and go all the way through creating your entire SIEM by yourself with the whole Elastic stack. So you're going to learn how to do this on your own. You're going to learn how to parse and ingest logs, and that will keep costs down. And I think that makes this class easily justified as a win here, considering some of the costs of some of these things. So we have some challenges. We have SIEM deployment. That's always tricky. It can take a really long time. The good news is you will be deploying a SIEM in 2 days in class and learn about all it takes to do that. So if you were to take this class, hopefully you could accelerate this way beyond some of the issues that we see where people have year-long deployments for SIEMs. It's going to be staff training. It's going to show you how to make a highly available setup. You don't want a security team that's blind. And depending on how your SIEM scales, if you don't have something that scales horizontally, it can be very costly to set up a highly available SIEM. Then there's the routine operational tasks. There's the optimization and upgrades and making sure you're staying under your events per second or your volume restrictions, whatever it is. Scope creep always wants to add more and more to that. So you need to be able to control that and plan going ahead into the future. And then of course there's the parsing and enrichment, which I've already discussed is extremely important to be able to do. And you're going to learn all of that in this class. So SEC 455 is the first SANS SIEM design course. It is born from the passion and curiosity and demand from our students, primarily from SEC 555. There are other classes that use the Elastic Stack too. Maybe you've run into it, but people are constantly curious and they're like, wow, this is really great what we're doing in this class. I wish I could learn more. So like I said, that's where it came from. What we're really trying to do here is lower the bar for installation and understanding the Elastic Stack and give you the fast track to having an Elastic-based SIEM. So some people might say, Elasticsearch, that's not on the Magic Quadrant. I didn't really know that that could be used as a SIEM. Maybe you're not familiar with it. That's actually intentional. Elasticsearch is a much bigger product with many, many use cases. Elasticsearch is a search engine, but we are using it in a particular way that makes it work as a SIEM. This is not some questionable open source software. A lot of big companies are using this. All the ones listed there all have projects, whether it be SIEM or otherwise, implemented with Elasticsearch. They're being used to index billions of logs per day and other events. So students seem to love and want to know how to use it when they see it, and that's what brought us here. So should we trust our most important data to Elasticsearch? Well, there's a lot of SIEM choices out there, some closed source, some open source. If you have one of the ones highlighted in red here, that's already what's going on. Elasticsearch is the backend for the ones highlighted in red. So many products have already shifted to it. It's a really solid package, and it works really well. It's quick, and it lends itself to the use case for trying to parse through a lot of data very quickly, and it scales well to do that. If you have a different SIM product, this can still be useful to you because you'll learn the concepts of how a SIM works and how it should work, and you can do the kind of feature translation in your head or something like that. But it's still very useful. And so you can pick up the concepts of what you need to implement a SIM that's going to be useful. This is an interesting chart. So I was trying to compare the difference in popularity of Elasticsearch and SIM, and you can see Elasticsearch was created back in 2012. And so when you look at the popularity of Google searches since 2012 when it was created, we're now at about parity between one particular product of Elasticsearch and the term SIM. So it is a very big industry of people that's using it. It's a popular product. It's awesome. We think you'll like what it has to offer. So it's time for a decision. If you're frustrated with your current solution, if you're looking to acquire your first SIM, maybe you're a new company just building up a security team, you can kind of decide which way you want to go here. You can take the red pill, professional services will call you in the morning, or you can take the blue pill, dive into SEC 455, and we will show you how to do this all for yourself. You can create a demystified solution, you'll understand it from the ground up, and you'll be able to build this by yourself. And that's going to allow you to save money, get a more nimble, more highly performing, and more capable result. So at this point, I'm going to pass the webinar over to Justin to dive into more of the course content details. Over to you, Justin.
All right, thank you. So at this point, I'm going to give you guys a slight pause. For those of you who took the red pill, feel free to exit the webcast. Okay, so if you're deciding to stay, you are choosing the path of resistance, you're willing to put forth the effort, you're willing to go through all the complexities, then what we're trying to do is with the SANS promise in a 2-day fashion, so fire hose and all, we want to shove so much stuff down your throat, but you're going to leave having a full built open source SIM. Now, this slide represents all the key aspects again that we're wanting to focus in on and nail. Specifically, fast searching. This is one of my pet peeves. I do a lot of consulting work, and the coffee break SIM, it's not a term, it's a reality. I can't expend like how many times I've been to a shop where you click search and it takes 5 minutes, and it's not like it was a historical 1-year search. Like it was saying, hey, look for this domain in the last week's data, and you're just sitting there looking at your watch. That is completely unacceptable. And Elasticsearch is built very much so for fast searching because it's a search engine. Easy log parsing is probably one of my favorite things about it. Now this is Logstash, which is part of Elasticsearch stack. Logstash, in my opinion, from the different commercial SIMs I've used, can slice and dice a log better than all of them, to the point where if I'm working with an organization who refuses to use Elasticsearch, and there's no problem with that at all. 455 is very Elasticsearch specific. 555 is SIM neutral because at the core of my being, I just want you to be able to do your jobs. I will sometimes put Logstash in a commercial environment that is not using Elasticsearch because it's able to slice and dice logs and more easily adapt, change things, and enrich the living daylights out of a log. We'll come back to enrichment here in just a second. And again, we want pretty dashboards, we want pretty visualizations, and at the end of the day, what we really just need is to represent our data in a meaningful way. And that is one of the things I really love about it. In some aspects, it's bad because you don't get default dashboards. When you set up Elasticstack by default, it's empty. But it's very easy to quickly build visualizations and dashboards and start to get things laid out. They can have the pretty good-looking pew-pew maps for management, yay! Or we can have just highly functional data graphs that we can look at. And probably the best thing, you can run the entire Elastic Stack in a virtual platform, on commodity hardware that you're getting ready to throw out, off cheap hardware that you can purchase in. You can size it, say, for 5,000 EPS, and oh, I made a mistake, I need 10. Okay, just add in a little bit more hardware. Doesn't even have to be the same size. and you can horizontally scale. You can keep scaling out. You can keep adding to your cluster. It's very easy to do. And okay, probably the number one thing that usually turns people off is, well, I can't do Elasticsearch because it's open source. Well, that's technically not true. You have open source. You can deploy entirely open source, or you can buy their commercial subscription, which comes at a pretty good premium. So if you like to spend money, that's an option too. So you can do the open source version. I've had a company that we've rolled out even last month. They can do 60,000 EPS, commodity hardware, super duper cheap, works great. They're 100% open source. And then most folks that run Elasticsearch will roll out the free edition and then eventually add the commercial subscription on top of it. So you have options. So with that, let's kind of jump in here what we're actually doing. So Elasticsearch is not Elasticsearch. It's the Elastic Stack. You probably previously heard this called ELK. I still call it ELK because I think it's awesome. You have E Elasticsearch, L Logstash, K Kibana, so ELK. Elastic wants to get away from that. They want to be the Elastic Stack. But basically, you have three major components. So we start with Logstash. Well, actually, we start before that. You have your log agents. You have your syslog sources, your appliances, and they are shoving logs to a central location. That central location is Logstash. So again, Logstash is going to give you multiple ways to pick up logs, whether encrypted, non-encrypted, high integrity, normal integrity, parsing, doing modern parsing. Again, you should look up that webcast if you're interested in that. And it's going to modify the logs and then shove them over into Elasticsearch. Elasticsearch is going to properly index them, give you those high-speed searches, historical analysis, log retention, all the legalities, the compliance requirements, it's there. And then you're going to use Kibana. Kibana is the front end. That's what your analysts will be using to look at the data. It's the GUI. So that's where most people are comfortable with. So 455 focuses in on the deployment of all three of these components and additional things. Because again, what the SANS promise is that you have actionable items. You can go home and immediately do stuff. So in the class, in 2 days, you're going to stand up these components plus things like log agents and get things in and fully functional by the time you leave. It's really freaking cool. So here's the problem. If you search for deploying Elasticsearch, this is probably the first meme or picture you're going to come across, which is just hilarious. I see this meme all the time, and it is 100% accurate. One does not simply deploy Elasticsearch. Now, what the heck does that mean? One does not simply deploy Elasticsearch. Come on, Lord of the Rings, that's all fun and dandy, but what are they referring to? And what they're referring to is there's a lot of nuance in an Elasticsearch deployment. There's a lot of areas where you can totally mess things up. And the great news is, hey, Elasticsearch is fully documented online. All you have to do is go to elastic.co, search Elasticsearch, Logstash, Kibana, and it's going to say, here's how you install it. Here's how you tune it. Here's all the settings. Except for the documentation, in all fairness, if you're an Elastic employee on the call, I'm sorry, is horrible. It's built by developers for developers because, to be honest, the SIM side of ELK or Elasticstack is only a small percent of their business. They're primarily a search engine, but their SIM offering is fantastic. In fact, it's better than they are even aware of. I've completely replaced top 5 Magic Quadrant SIMs with Elasticstacks in less than a month and was more successful. It's that flexible and awesome. But I'm here to tell you, it requires a lot of planning. If you don't do it right, you're going to have a traffic jam. You're going to have servers or services really crashing. You're going to have data that also gets lost. You're going to suffer from issues like split brain, which you permanently lose your data, at least part of it, depending on which brain. Don't worry about what that is. You're going to have things where things don't scale properly, aren't parsing correctly. You're going to have errors in your logs, and you'll be like, well, that was descriptive. And it's just You know, one of the number one things that you can learn from is pain. Well, John and I have been through a lot of pain. And this class is basically us sharing, hey, don't touch the stove. It's hot. We're going to show you the things, the mistakes. I've made just about all the mistakes you can make. So I can share with you, here's the right way to do it that is specific to a SIEM deployment. We want to catch the bad guys. We want to do tactical analytics. We want to do really freaking awesome enrichment. And you want to achieve really awesome speeds. Here are the ways you need to do it. So we're going to help you plan it out. Elasticsearch has their own training. It's great. But again, it's developer focused. So this class is specific to, I want to deploy a SIEM that is flexible and awesome, and that I can save a bunch of money by doing it right. And we're going to try to help you plan that out because we feel this can really change the industry as John is leading. This is not a money-making business for us. This is I really feel we can help folks become more nimble and flexible and feel productive and good about themselves. We want to affect the community in a positive way, and that requires careful planning. So let's start at the beginning. We've got logs coming in, whether this is from Elastic's Bead agent, which is free, other open source agents like NXLog, which there's special ways to wrap around and make it even better. Syslog, which is really syslog-ng or syslog. They seem scary, but they're actually highly configurable. They're no longer just traditional, plain old beat-up syslog, to the point where they don't even have to send logs in syslog format. There's a little mind-blowing going on right there, okay? So we have logs. We're going to talk about how to grab these, shove them to a central fashion, log stash, specifically so that we can receive them, parse them, normalize them, which is doing even basic stuff like renaming the fields. That might sound really dumb, but again, if you want, here's a pain point right now. I'll give you a little cheat sheet. If you don't normalize your fields, you are going to feel the burn later. I promise it. As an example, most of us think of source IP, dest IP. Bro logs are one of my favorite logs ever. What's source IP in Bro? It's orig H for originating host. Ouch. We need to get the fields renamed. And enrich. And I'm going to say something, and I'm totally fine with backing this up. Top 5 Magic Quadrant SIEMs are not very good at enrichment. They're just not. I'm totally comfortable saying that. That doesn't mean they're horrible products, but enrichment is one area that Logstash is extremely flexible. And what am I talking about here? I can take something like google.com and I can append to the log, hey, is this a top 1 million domain? Is it in a threat intel list? What's the TLD? What's the frequency analysis? What's the on and on and on and on? What's the who is creation date? What's all this information? I could take one field, enrich it so much that I added 15 additional fields, and now I have a context-aware, analysis-driven SIEM. That's really powerful. And that's the whole point. If you know how to build your own SIEM, which sounds way scarier than it really is, again, we're going to do this in 2 days, you can now take a SIEM, which, to be honest, a lot of them are more built for compliance. The out-of-the-box experience is crap. And you can tune it to actually be analysis-driven and led. And you can make some significant headway on being tactical. That's more 555 or 55s on deployment, but you can get there. And then, of course, enriching, we can also drop logs. We can filter like a madman to the point where you could take logs from all your endpoints. What? I can't do that. That's too many logs. Yeah, you can, because we can filter in some awesome ways that don't break compliance. Pause. That's right. We can filter and still meet compliance. That's a scary concept. I'm not going to beat that one anymore, but we can. And on top of that, we have our storage. Again, once it goes from Logstash, we do all the filtering, the enriching, whatever. We then shove it over in Elasticsearch, which is the storage system. But we're not going to stop there, because to have an enterprise SIEM deployment, it has to be redundant. has to be highly available. All these fun things. So like some of the concepts we're going to talk about in the class is like, how can we do central log collection that is actually truly redundant? So things like we have 2 workstations in the top left corner. They're using a beats agent, which can automatically load balance to Logstash nodes. Well, that's great. What happens if I don't have beats? What happens if I'm doing nxlog, syslog, or I have dumb appliances that can't do anything other than shove a log off to an IP address? Well, then there's tricks we can do with the load balancer and get the load balancer then to distribute the logs. Again, still allows us to scale horizontally, still lets us get us logs at super high blazing speed, but in the case where we have both smart agents and not smart log sources, we actually want to use a combination of both techniques because it's optimized for performance. So we spent a lot of time in 455 on doing the SIEM deployment for blazing fast speeds, but still focusing on security. So this is like one of the slides we would have in the class. And then again, of course, we have the data still. So once the data's in, we have all these, what they refer to as documents. Think of it as like a row in a table or a database. You have your individual documents, which are your individual logs. They're stored in Elasticsearch in a JSON format, which is really key value pairs, key being the field name, value being the value of the field. So on the right, we see all these different fields. Again, you want to have another pain point. Elasticsearch is schema-less. Well, kinda. And there's this big debate on should SIEMs be schema-less or schema, which really means if you've ever collected a log into a SIEM and it was schema aware and you didn't tell the SIEM about the field, what typically happens is it's like, I don't know what that field is, therefore that log doesn't belong in my SIEM, drop. Which is good in the sense that data is always optimized and you're only accepting data that you should have. It's bad in that it's really hard to custom tune your logs because you have to be aware of everything. So Elasticsearch allows us to do kind of both. We can specify a schema and it will do a schema on write for new fields, which basically is it will guess. Ooh, source IP, I think that's a string. Oh, fail, because now when I search IPs, I can't do ranges. So we're going to talk about the pain points and how to properly do schema structures, how we can specify fields, field types, but without going crazy. Here's an example, Windows. How many fields do you think a single Windows 10 box has? And if you answered like, I don't know, 50, let's just say you're a little off. A single Windows desktop probably has upwards of 500 fields. The difference is the commercial solutions only hone in on, say, 100 to 200 of them. Because there's too many new ones coming out. You have special logging utilities like Sysmon, which is super fantastic and awesome. And they don't have to keep learning these, so they get behind. Well, if we can combine schema and schema on write, we can get the best of both worlds, and you can search across every single field. So it's fantastic. And again, the type of field matters, but in many cases, we can guess or handle it with Logstash, so things still come in as integers versus strings versus IPs. It's awesome, but you got to know to do it. Elasticsearch, again, that's where we're going to have our schema or schemaless. You're also going to have the concepts of clusters, of nodes, of shards, of replicas. It seems really weird. And if you're looking at the diagram and you're not familiar with Elasticsearch, I could totally see where this is scary. So you think about it, let's say we have 2 physical servers and we want to have data span both of them. Well, to make things super, super fast, well, both nodes are part of a cluster. So that's all a cluster is basically saying all data falls within these 2 physical boxes. The 2 physical boxes in this case would be a bare metal Elasticsearch install. Those are our nodes. And when data is wrote, instead of a traditional approach of, oh, you have one database and it's on one server, it's like it gets split up. into shards. And those shards cross more than one host, and when you do a search, all the shards get searched. So it's distributing your queries across multiple nodes for high performance. And replicas really, this is not an exact given, I just don't want to spend too much time on it. Think of it as a dynamic RAID. It's like a RAID 1 per shard, but if you lose the replica or the shard, the system can dynamically recreate stuff. So you could lose an entire box, like, oh my God, my data, except for you have a backup. And even then, when you lose a node, it'll start creating up another replica so you have a backup again. So there's tons of resiliency, and you can even tune that and get even higher resiliency. And shards, we can adjust the counts for performance. We can do things that help us, and you can totally do things like, oh, you give too much shards, and now you're actually losing performance because you didn't plan it out correctly. So Elasticsearch is totally scary, but again, come to 455, learn from our mistakes, learn what we've learned, and figure out how to tune these things properly for a SIM-driven approach. Completely different. Okay, so what is the layout of 455? So we have day one. Day one is John Hubbard's awesome freaking first SANS course he's wrote, and to be honest, he's totally nailed it. So day one, you start with creating your own Elasticsearch cluster. And let's be clear, you're doing a multi-node cluster. We're not teaching you how to do a simple one-node cluster. No. We're going to make you do a full cluster. We're going to have 2 nodes for simplicity. You're going to be creating data. You're going to be creating indexes. You're going to have the fields properly, the field types. We're going to cause issues. You're going to see shards get spanned across the 2 nodes. We're going to teach you how to do things like solid state versus SATA disks, because you might want initial data to be very fast, but historical data can be slow. We're going to show you how to do that. On top of that, we're going to show you Kibana. You're going to install Kibana. You're going to start looking at your data, building some visualizations, and actually seeing things work. So day one, already you have a functional Elasticsearch cluster, and you can search through your data. Now, what you're not doing on day one yet is you're not ingesting logs. We'll give you some sample logs. We'll actually restore a backup of logs. We're going to show that stuff so that you can start searching it. And here's the coolest thing. And this is kind of borderline. It's kind of scary because 455 is a 4-level class. Let's be honest, it's a 4-level class. Some of the stuff we do in the class probably is a little bit of 5-level. For example, when we say securing your SIM, what we're actually doing is showing you how to properly utilize certificates in PKI so that you can have encrypted Elasticsearch communication, encrypted Kibana communication, multiple users and roles, proper auditing, and then also the integration, which on day 2 would be for encryption with Logstash. And in a 2-day course, we actually show you how to do that in a fairly easy to follow fashion. If you've ever even rolled your first SSL cert on a web server, that could be a little hard at first, and as you get more experience, like, yeah, I got that, that's easy. But once you start diving into mutually authenticated certificates, CAs, multiple services requiring proper DNS names, it gets hairy and painful as all get out. And yet John has a very simple lab at the end of the day where he walks you through this, and it's just like butter. It goes so smooth and it just works, and it's awesome. So that's day one. Day one, you've got Elasticsearch and Kibana. Day 2, we clearly moved to the better day. It's my day. This is where we focus on Logstash for most of the day. So it's central log collection, very heavy focus on, hey, I want you to be able to parse your own logs. No. I don't want you to outsource it to professional services. I don't want you to pay me to do it. I want you to know how to do it because it's not that hard. It seems really scary. So we're going to have labs for both traditional regex type parsing, and I'm going to show you some pretty ways to do it. that allow you to see your work as you're going, and it will remove some of the stress. You'll actually see what's going on. Even if you don't know what you're doing, what I've got set up for you makes it so easy for you to plug something in, see what happened. Oh, nope, that's not right. Let me just keep guessing until it works, and that's okay. That's what I'm going to show you, because that's really all how hard it is. And then we're going to flip over into modern log parsing. This is if you can change your log formats, which many times you can, you don't need to parse. You don't need to parse at all. Key value, JSON, in some instances XML, you can just shove that to Logstash, use a modern log parser, and it will auto-extract your fields and values. And we'll have a lab showing you how to do that as well. We're also going to talk about message brokers, which is buffering, which is more for resiliency and making sure you can do things like system upgrades without losing logs. We're going to talk about log collection and agents, whether that's from Windows, Linux, or just weird appliances. And we'll have a lab on doing NXLog and beats, because I want to show you multiple agents. And if you don't want to use those, I don't care. The point of this whole thing is you have a flexible SIM. You get to make calls. I'm just showing you different things you can do so that you can be enabled to go back home and make it work. And then we're going to end with alerting. And with the alerting system, we're going to specifically talk about Elastic's built-in alert capabilities, which really is more for commercial support, as well as open source offerings that allow you to use Elasticsearch as a highly productive alert engine, which that's really cool because there's some stuff I can do with, in this case, ElastAlert that you can't do on some commercial SIMs. So some very powerful stuff, open source, full security integration if you have encryption and integrity concerns. It's baked in. Now I want you to stop and think about this for a second. This means literally in 2 days, which are 8-hour classes, you're literally rolling an entire SIM. Like, no lie. 2 days, you've got it rolled. And it's not like it's some demo distribution in that, whoop-de-doo, I got it up and running, but it's not actually ready to do anything. It's not tuned. It's not optimized. No. We cover that stuff. Part of our labs are, okay, in a production environment, here's exactly what you need to be adjusting. Go adjust it in your system just so you know how it's done in production. You know, optimize memory for Java, because it's weird. Change file limitations and descriptors, because you need to do that in production. We have you do that. So day 1, Elasticsearch Kibana. Day 2, Logstash and Log Agents. Done. Open source SIM, you literally go back to work. You could literally take the VM if you wanted, put it in production. Probably not recommending that, but you can repeat the labs you did, because this is a lab-heavy class. And you can do it with ease and confidence. At least that's what the promise we're trying to deliver to you guys. We want you to be able to just completely own this. So that is 455. So here's the return on investment. Here's why 455 is beneficial to you. And I'm speaking to you as a member of the security community, not as some guy who's going to get rich off your wallet. Because I'm not going to get rich off a 2-day class. It's the fast track to deploying Elasticsearch, absolutely. And on top of that, I just want to call it out again. It's you learning from all the mistakes of ourselves and folks we work with. Here's how not to touch the stove and not to get burnt. You're going to set up your entire cluster. You're going to be able to do optimized searches, not just like searches, but how can I search that doesn't turn my SIM into a coffee break SIM over time? How can I have pretty visualizations and dashboards that just matter? How can I manage retention? Maybe I need PCI logs for 1 year, but they can be in archive format after 30 or 60 days, but 30 or 60 days, they have to be in an active format. How do I put my hunt team logs on solid states for 7 days? Because I need them to be fast, fast, fast. How can I secure the system? Encryption. What TLS? How can I assign roles so that certain people can see certain things? And of course, parsing, and log enrichment. We'll also talk a little bit of other things that we're not going to go really deep in, but like machine learning. You have Elasticsearch. That's technically a big pot of data. So I have a guy on my team, his name is Austin Taylor. He's a data scientist. He does a lot of that work. You know, he's familiar with working like Hive, HTTPS, all the advanced data science data sources. And to be honest, a lot of times for us, he'll just dive into Elasticsearch and use it directly for machine learning. And if you pay for the commercial support, you also have their version of machine learning. But my point is, there are other ways to directly invoke Elasticsearch without Logstash or Kibana, and we're going to talk about those as well. So you can do some really cool stuff. So 455, it's a new class. It's going to be betting in February 12th and 13th in DC. I get to do the official go live after the beta in Orlando, which is awesome. So that's April 9th and 10th at SANS 2018, the big old conference for the year. And then we're going to have John follow me up at Security West, which is an awesome smaller conference that's cyber defense focused, May 17th through 18th. SEC 455 being a 2-day class, just letting you know, if you package it on with a 6-day class, I think it might be true for 5-day as well, but don't quote me on this. There's a pretty steep discount. I think it's like $1,000 off, which almost halves the price of the class. So if you're going to go to a conference this year, add on 455 because you're going to get a really good discount. If not, I really hope to see everybody there. It's going to be fantastic. Again, I'm not lying. I built this class for you guys because I want to help the community. It's not a money source. I don't know what John's reasons are. You'll have to ask him. But I really feel like if we can start to take control and own our stuff and adjust it, every single solution, open source, commercial, the reason it fails is not properly configured. This class is all about properly configuring and deploying something. So I hope you guys can see the value in doing this. I hope to see you at 455. And just a quick shout out, 555 now has pre-sign up for its certification, the GIAC Detection Analyst Cert. Heck yeah. Sorry, I had to do that. It's not related, but I'm shamelessly going to call that out. So at this point, we're going to stay for any questions you guys have. Ask us whatever you want. We're here. Our time's for you right now. So I'm going to turn it over, and we'll start to do some Q&A.
All right, thanks for that great presentation. Yes, we do have some questions ready for the Q&A. However, if anyone has a question for our presenters, please enter it into the questions window now. Our first question is, I'm working on building an ELK stack SIM for home lab, either SOF-ELK or other. Any suggestions for continued education in order to build skill set? How do you practice if your current job role isn't blue team related?
So I can take that one. I run ELK at home myself too, and you know, just I want to say going through the documentation, but like Justin said, it can be a little bit confusing. I have stumbled through it myself. That is a good way to do it. There's a lot of good stuff on their blog that tells you how to do specific tasks. But yeah, running it in the home lab, even if you're not doing it at work, is a great way to keep those skills up. And looking at what other people have done in the past. One of the things we didn't mention actually is that can be a little bit of an issue, and why the class is important. We wrote this class to the very newest version, Elastic version 6. It just came out. It actually came out as we released the class. And if you go back too far into people's blog posts, a lot of the stuff you'll find on the internet might not be as relevant. So that's one of the other tricky parts of figuring out how to work an Elastic stack. But looking at the newer blog posts and just understanding how to move through their documentation and running it at home, playing with it yourself is a great way to do that.
Yeah, and I'm going to add to that too. And also, we have we personally have a GitHub. Can you open the GitHub while I open it? The Logstash one we have.
Yeah.
John?
Yep.
So we have a GitHub that is chock full of it's mainly Logstash, but it has a ton of parsers and capabilities from key log sources. You can reverse analyze that and figure out, again, even if you're using it for forensics, SoftElk is great for forensics, by the way. But even if you're using it for like Red Team, because Elasticsearch is now part of a lot of those tools, you can go in here. It's github.com/HASecurity-solutions, and it's just full of free configurations. There's also a little bit of documentation on like some specific installations. and I'm updating that from version 5 to version 6 outside the master branch. And there's also Security Onion, which is cyber defense related, but they're trying to stay current on the ELK stack. And if you look at how they're doing things, you can kind of figure out some of the documentation on what you're trying to do.
All right, thank you. While this, oh, I lost it. Sorry, give me 1 second. So many questions coming in at once. While the SEC 455 course came second, I assume the preferred order of enrollment is 455, then 555?
All right, I'm totally taking that one, John. No, it doesn't matter. 555 is SIM agnostic. It will always be SIM agnostic. 555 is more focused on what logs matter, how to make those logs better for catching bad guys, and how to take any SIM and make it tactical. It would be beneficial to take 455 first, just in the sense that you would have a better understanding of the SIM components. But day one of 555 focuses on what the SIM components are. The labs are ELK specific just because it's open source, but 555 is totally SIM neutral, so it shouldn't really matter unless you need a better coverage of the SIM components.
All right, thanks. Can you comment on OSSEC and how it compares and contrasts to the stack described here?
Can you say that again?
OSSEC. We could have the attendee clarify if you want. OSSEC agents, he says.
Are you talking about the
OSSEC agents?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. So OSSEC, OSSEC. I'm sorry. OSSEC it's primarily a HIDS, a host-based intrusion detection system. It has been historically heavily preferred by the open source community for a log agent. I'm not against it. That being said, it's not purpose-built really as a log agent, and things like NXLog, I don't want to compare it to Beats, but like NXLog is going to be able to do so much more stuff with getting logs, specialty logs, or custom framing logs and shipping them off compared to OSSEC. So they're kind of apples and oranges at this point. If you want like pure play normal Windows logs, OSSEC's going to give you that. If you want to get all these weird logs off the system, OSSEC is not really going to do that, or you're going to have to do some heavy labor tuning because it's not the easiest thing to work with compared to something that's primarily a log agent.
All right, thanks. I've got 2 questions that are related. The course description sounds like it may require a pretty beefy laptop. Are there special requirements? How many cores, RAM, disk size, etc.? And someone else asks, can you confirm the minimal system requirements for the ELK, memory, and CPU?
Yep, so for 455, I believe the core requirement is that you have to have 8 gig of RAM, and the processor, really anything that's like a i5 is probably fine. Even an i3 probably would be okay. The biggest limitation is going to be memory. You need 8 gig. I would guess based on the way we did our labs, you could probably get away with potentially 4, but the labs are going to run slower for sure. So I'd say the minimum requirements we have on the SANS page, I believe, reflect 8 gig. That is highly recommended. We potentially could make it work less than that, but let's just go with 8 gig of RAM. CPU is not as important just because of the way we wrote the labs.
Yeah, the requirements on the website are accurate. The 8 gig thing, I would highly recommend. We could potentially customize it to use less than that, but I don't think you would probably want to.
And do you guys know the tuition for SEC 455?
What was that question again? I'm sorry, Carol.
Do you know the tuition for SEC 455?
Tuition? Oh, the cost? I believe it's $29.95 once it's out of beta, and that's if you're doing it. I believe that's if it's standalone. Like if you pair it with another class, it's either 1500 or 2000, and then the beta in DC, I believe, is 1500.
Yeah, so for the debut course right now, it's 2480 for the course, or 1480 if you sign up for a full course along with it.
Okay, gotcha.
All right, thanks. Which day would you work on use case development?
So technically the whole class is a running use case of using it specifically for SIM and log ingestion. We don't, again, we only have 2 days, so we don't focus a lot on, oh, you have this specific need, let's talk about that. Instead, we talk about all the different settings you're going to need to tune and why, but we don't drive them with a custom use case for all the different things, short of the master use case of, I need a SIM. Like we're going to talk about compliance and a little bit of tactical use, but again, in 2 days, we're really focused on getting you an operational SIM.
Yeah, on the end of the second day, we do have the alerting section that tells you how to develop, the alerts for your use cases and such, but we don't really go into use case management as much.
All right, thanks. A couple people are asking, what about the people that use Security Onion? Does it integrate? And phrased differently, is SoftElk going to be merged with Security Onion?
Justin?
So I love that. So I actually partnered with Phil Hagen with SoftElk. I want to give him most of the credibility because that's primarily been his baby and he's done an awesome job with it. SoftElk is going to stay primarily focused on forensics. I will probably occasionally go back through and try to give a bunch of my Logstash configs and stuff to them so that it can be used for operations and forensics. Security Onion is actually a partnership between myself and Doug Burks, who is freaking amazing. And we're trying to get effectively all the stuff in 455 and 555 merged into a free open source platform for the community. And so, yes, it integrates because realistically, all the labs I'm doing in 555, those configs are already baked into Security Onion. All the special enrichment techniques are already baked into Security Onion. And the stuff we're doing with 455, we are trying to work with Doug to automate. He's already making leaps and bounds awesome improvement on it. It's awesome. The difference being, if you were to deploy Security Onion, let's say it comes to the 1.0 release of Elastic, you have multiple nodes, you have this awesome cluster. If you were to deploy Security Onion, even once that's primetime ready, the problem is you're not going to understand how everything's working under the hood. And if there's issues, you're not going to be ready to troubleshoot it without buying support or hitting a forum and just struggling through it. And this class will prepare you for that. So you'd be way better off because you'd actually be able to, and you'd be able to tune it, because even if I deploy what I've given you guys for free and what Doug's given you for free, you should be tuning things or having custom log sources, because we all do.
All right, thanks. My boss would prefer to outsource SIM to an MSP, so we don't have to hire a SIM analyst. Money is not an object. How would I sell this to him?
Okay. I'll start with this one, and John, smack me around if you have a different opinion. This is my opinion. You can outsource a specific task, but you can't outsource caring. So, like for instance, if you're trying to be tactical, and if you have a SIM because you're trying to catch the bad guys, then your primary folks who are going to catch the bad guys need to know your environment. They need to be custom to your environment. And MSSP is based on economies of scale. Customization is their enemy. What they want to do is do certain things really, really well, and they are really good at those things. But as far as really tuning it to your environment, unless you're doing a small mom and pop, that's probably not going to happen. Where I've seen really good success is a hybrid where it's MSSP plus on-premise. But again, if your boss is wanting to just completely 100% outsource it, then I'm saying you're going to primarily get a compliance checkbox. And I apologize if I offend anybody seeing that way. That's not always the case, but again, I can tell you, I own my own business, and the vast majority of customers I've consulted with and worked with who are using 100% MSSP, it's a nightmare, and they're not actually getting tactical security. And plus, there's no such thing as 100% outsourced because you still need folks to review alerts they send your way and stuff like that. So it's a pipe dream.
Yeah, I would echo that, and maybe just add that it's an interesting situation, because if money is not an object, I would argue that it would be hard to convince yourself that you can't get a better set of analysts that will sit in-house, know your stuff, know your culture. So if you believe that, it seems to me like you would want to do it in-house if money is not an object. So I think this is definitely the better way to do it, and you can hire those people who will care and who will be the best at what they do.
Yep. Or you could outsource initially with the motivation to bring it in-house. Like if you're trying to get off the ground quickly, I mean, that's a different strategy, but
All right, thanks.
Apologize. I feel pretty strongly about that one.
Someone did respond positively, said it was a good response. With the limited availability of classes scheduled, is there talk of a Vlive option or remote access option? And someone says, similarly, keen to know if SEC 455 is available online as well.
So I love you guys all. I'm glad that I paid people in the audience to ask that question. No, I'm kidding. I am personally, and John is personally, we are hounding SANS because we really badly want this to be an on-demand or Vlive or I'm going to say the short answer is yes. It just means that John and I have to prove that the class is successful and not an epic failure, which it's totally not going to be. And then after we prove that, there'll be a very good likelihood, because I won't quit nagging until it happens, that we end up in on-demand and get simulcast and stuff like that. So
and there will be more courses.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there's going to be a lot more that aren't on the SANS site yet. There'll be more live classes. But take that as a personal objective of mine that I'm going to try to get virtual options available for you guys.
All right, thanks. Can we design multi-tenant system / SIEM using ELK?
John, I can take that one, but.
I mean, absolutely you can. They have a couple of different options. Some of them are paid, the Elastic Cloud Enterprise and some of the other stuff does allow you to do that. In fact, that is what their solution is. If you want to buy some of their stuff, they have multi-tenant kind of setups going on, but that is a very easy thing to do. With that, you can run multiple clusters, you can do different roles to allow access to different data. You can run multiple nodes
John,
on one. What?
Just the way you mentioned that, I mean, John, part of what we're going to talk about in the class, in the securing the stack, part of those solutions will allow multi-tenancy. So I just want to call out, you can do it on-prem or in the cloud.
Yep.
Just because I think, there might have been confusion on the way you initially worded that.
Okay.
And I also, I'm going to make a call out, even if you guys don't ask this question, but part of what we're also going to talk about in 455, and this might scare some folks, is we're going to talk about containers. I specifically call out using Docker, which is not virtualization. It's microservice implementation and how we can use that. So we do talk about in 455 bare metal installs versus virtualization installs versus container-based microservices. So if that's something you guys are interested in, the labs aren't based on containers, although I'm hoping to add extra credit labs that show you how to do it. I personally am probably going to do some instructor demos because there's some really cool things and auto scale options you can do with that. So we talk about multi-tenancy and advanced deployments. You're just not going to necessarily do them in the lab. And we do have a digital wiki, which is going to show and evolve over time how to do stuff, and that will be free.
Oh, and speaking of the digital wiki, both Justin and I just tweeted a sample of the labs and the lab videos with the very thorough walkthroughs that we're going to be creating for this class.
You want to throw up our Twitter handles so they know how to get to it?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a 1-minute video clip showing exactly The clips I took are literally from the labs that you're going to be doing in class. So if you can take the time to take 1 minute, you can see exactly how a video walkthrough looks and feels in 455. And all the labs are in this format.
Do you guys have a few more minutes for a couple extra questions, or?
Always for our students.
All right. If I have blank vendor already deployed, will 455 or 555 or other classes help me in the team? And similarly, someone asks, what value do I bring back for improving a vendor SIM while I lobby for a FOSS SIM?
So 555 is going to focus, again, it's SIM neutral. So it's going to help you use any SIM. It's just remember that 555 is focused on tactical use of log data and analytics. So 555 would definitely help you regardless of what SIM you're using. 455, I just want to go back to it. We did not go to SANS and say we want to create 455. All the students from 555 saw the cool stuff we were doing in the labs, which is for free, and they kept saying, I can't do that with blank vendor. Can you show me how you're doing that? And to be honest, the answer many times is you can do it with your commercial vendors. It's just not as easy. But student demand created 455. If you are using Splunk, Logarithm, QRadar, ArcSight, and you're not switching, 455 is only going to help you in the sense that you're going to better understand the moving parts of a SIM. I don't know if it'll be directly applicable to your job. 455 is more of, you might not be happy with your commercial SIM. Maybe you want to do a bake-off of what you currently have versus something free, and you'd be surprised at how often the free solution is going to win. In fact, from my consulting, anytime I've done a bake-off, and I'm not the one driving the bake-off, the open source solution has won. I'm just throwing that out there. So 455 is more of, I don't have a SIM, I'm unhappy with my SIM, or I just want to do a bake-off so that I can get a discount with my commercial vendor. Then you use 455. And John, feel free to elaborate on that.
Yeah, I think you covered it pretty well. Like I think we both mentioned, you will learn the moving parts of a SIM. If you're coming into a job looking to do SIM infrastructure engineering type work, and you want to understand the flow of a log from where it's created through aggregation and pipeline enrichment and all that stuff, how it's stored, and what you might want to ultimately do with it, 455 will tell you that.
All right, thanks. Following up on the first question, if we are running ELK in a home lab, what's the best way to get traffic that will test alerts? I'd prefer not to surf to malicious sites or fish my kids.
Oh, that's an easy question. If you're wanting to play with some of that, one, you could do virtual systems and let those get infected. Or if you really just want to do really basic stuff, you can actually find PCAPs, like Contagio dumps. John, what's the site you always have to remind me about that has really nice walkthroughs?
Of what sort? Oh, malwaretrafficanalysis.net.
Yeah, so malwaretrafficanalysis.net will give you a malicious PCAP, which is not going to explode in your face, but it has captured something of malice, but it provides many times a walkthrough of what happened, and you can use TCP replay and funnel that through like Bro or Suricata or Snort, and then let those logs go into your SIM and test alerts off of that. It's not perfect because you don't get endpoints, but you can. In 555, we have an entire day dedicated to nothing but service logs like HTTP, DNS, X509, SSL stuff, and you can catch so much stuff. So that's why I'm going there.
Yeah, and in terms of host logs, there are, if you Google up like Squid proxy logs or IIS or Windows logs, you can get samples so that you could use those, or install Beats on your own system. That's one of the things I do at home, and just log your family laptops or whatever Windows security logs, and you can learn how that kind of thing works that way, or Linux or whatever you're running.
All right, thanks. And our last question for today. Speaking of Docker, have you looked at SIEM Monster?
Yes. SIEM Monster is another elk deployment. I don't want to say it's a beef at all. I feel like SIEM Monster, if you deploy it, it's very, very basic. It doesn't give you a good explanation of all the moving parts. And in order to have all the configs, like which parsers and stuff, it feels like they're pushing for a commercial subscription. I don't know if that's true or not. Please, again, I don't want to cause any ripples. But it seems like it's more of a push to get you a taste so that then you'll buy a open source subscription and support to get all the other log sources. So I've been steering people more towards Security Onion because the goal is to be completely free and transparent. And there's more documented, and it seems like a lot more of the community is using it.
All right, well, thank you so much, John and Justin, for your great presentation, which helps bring this content to the SANS community. To our audience, we greatly appreciate you listening in. For a schedule of all upcoming and archived SANS webcasts, including this one, please visit sans.org/webcasts. Until next time, take care, and we hope to have you back again for the next SANS webcast.